So there was like 10 Bible stories that I wanted to use for my sermon this morning, and a lot of them still come up. But the scripture that I want us to focus our attention on comes from the Gospel according to Matthew, the 14th chapter. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning Jesus came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. They said, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water, and he came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and began to sink. And he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Grace and peace to you all in the name of our still-speaking God, who loves us just the way we are and who loves us too much to let us stay that way. Will you pray with me? May these words of my mouth, may the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable and be pleasing in your sight, O God, for you alone are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So this morning we continue our Lenten sermon series, The Gifts of the Wilderness, based on The Gifts of the Dark Wood by Eric Elnes. This morning we explore together the gift of uncertainty. The Bible is filled with stories of Jesus healing people. People with leprosy, people who have lost their sight and are blind, people who are paralyzed, crippled. In one well-known story, a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, she reaches out and she touches Jesus, and immediately she is healed without having ever actually asked Jesus if he would be willing to heal her. Right? And she kind of steals some of his healing power when she reaches out and touches him. But Jesus notices this power going out of him, and Jesus says to the woman that that's all right. It's all right that you reached out and touched me. Your faith has made you well. But what if I told you that Jesus once healed a man without the man's consent? What if I told you that Jesus once healed someone who didn't want to be healed? In the 5th chapter of John's Gospel, you'll find the story of Jesus healing a paralyzed man. And this is a story that is probably familiar to most of you. Jesus encounters a paralyzed man who is sitting next to the pool at Bethsaida. Now this pool, it would have been surrounded by a bunch of different people with a bunch of different health issues, health problems. Because the legend says that whenever this pool would start to bubble and the waters of the pool would start to swirl, the first person to enter the pool would be healed of whatever disease, whatever ailment, whatever health problem they had. But the man that Jesus starts speaking to next to that pool of Bethsaida, this man has been lying there begging by the pool for the last 38 years. That's what the Bible tells us. 38 years he has been laying there by the side of the pool. And so Jesus asks the man, "Do you want to be healed?" The man replies, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Then Jesus says, "Stand up, take up your mat, and walk." And immediately that paralyzed man is not paralyzed anymore. He can walk again. But what if the man didn't actually want to be healed? There is plenty of evidence in the story to suggest that that is the case. First, when Jesus asks the man a direct question, "Do you want to be healed?" Jesus does not get a direct answer. Right? The man does not say, "Yes, I want to be healed." In fact, we might expect a man who's been paralyzed for the last 38 years to be angry in his direct answer, right? "Of course I want to be healed. How dare you ask me that?" But the paralyzed man doesn't actually give Jesus a direct answer. Instead, he gives Jesus all of the reasons, all of the excuses for why he has never been the first person to enter that pool in the last 38 years. And on that note, how is it possible that not once in 38 years was he the first person to enter the water? 38 years. Are we expected to believe that at no time in 38 years did somebody just come along and offer to help him into the water? Are we really expected to believe that after 38 years, all of the other sick people at the pool didn't once just say, "You know what? This guy's been waiting in line for a long time. Let's let him go. We can catch the next one." The final clue that this paralyzed man didn't actually want to be healed is that after his healing, he doesn't even say thank you to Jesus. No, instead, the first thing that he does is he goes begging in a different location. Jesus finds him later at the temple, begging. And Jesus reminds him that now he can go and get on with his life. And so from there, he goes and complains to the Pharisees that Jesus healed on the Sabbath. Why would this man prefer to be paralyzed? Why wouldn't he rejoice when Jesus gave him back to use his legs? Perhaps this man had become so accustomed to the life of begging. Perhaps he had become so accustomed to the life of being a paralyzed man that the thought of changing that routine frightened him. I mean, you think about it. He had spent 38 years of his life doing the same thing day after day. I'm not even 38 years old myself. He spent 38 years doing the same thing day after day. At some point, that routine starts to be comfortable, and from there, that routine actually starts to be a source of comfort. I think that this man found the idea of a future where he could go anywhere and do anything terrifying. Suddenly, this man has to take responsibility for himself and his future at the very moment when his future has become so uncertain. People are like that. We like routine. We definitely prefer routine to change, most of us. We definitely prefer certainty to uncertainty. We like a certain level of predictability in our lives. I'm speaking for myself here. I know I do. You know, Pam and I we're planning to take a vacation to Yellowstone this summer, and you should see my itinerary. I know where we will be staying every single night. I know the drive times between the places that we are going to go hiking. All of the reservations have been made for the hotels. All of the reservations have been made for the activities that we're going to be doing. I've even made a dinner reservation or two. It's all been planned and plotted and reserved. This is a trip that is happening in May. But I know myself well enough to know that that is the only way that I will be able to enjoy myself. I know that if I didn't know where we were staying and we didn't have a reservation, I could be staring at the Grand Tetons, and in front of all of this majestic beauty that God has made, I would just be standing there thinking, boy, I hope we can find a hotel tonight or a campsite that hasn't already filled up. Now, I understand that I am on the extreme end of this spectrum, and maybe I go a little more overboard in planning my travels. I know that some of you like more adventure, you like to live a little bit more on the edge when you travel. But there are other ways that I think that we would prefer to be in control, to prefer predictability in our lives. If you've lost your job, you're looking at changing jobs, you're looking at a new job, well, wouldn't it be great if there was a great big neon flashing sign telling you what the right choice was? How many of you have spent the last several months watching your retirement account's value grow and grow and grow, and all of a sudden start to shrink and shrink and shrink? Wouldn't it be nice if we had some predictability in the market? Maybe you're a parent who's had to bury a child, even though that's not the natural order of things, that we expect as parents that our children are going to bury us. We all, to some extent or another, we want routine, we want stability, we want certainty, we want predictability. But even if we're not exactly comfortable with uncertainty, uncertainty can be a gift. It can be a gift precisely because when we no longer have our firm foundation to stand upon, to rely upon, it is in those moments that we are most open to God, because it is in those moments that we reach out in desperation for God. Think of the story of Peter walking on water. Peter is already dealing with so much uncertainty, right? He and the other disciples, they are on this boat in the middle of this terrible storm. They're afraid that their boat might capsize. And then suddenly they see someone or something coming towards them on the surface of the water, and they think it's a ghost. So they get even more scared. When Jesus finally yells to them that it's him, that it's Jesus who's coming to them on the water, Peter, he calls back to Jesus, Lord, if it is you, command me to come out onto the water towards you. I love this about Peter. In the midst of all of that uncertainty and fear that is already going on, with the storm raging and with the disciples unable to believe what their eyes are seeing, Peter wants to go deeper into uncertainty. He asks Jesus to call him out of the safety of the boat and onto the water too. And Peter makes progress, but not much. After he goes a few steps, his fear grips him and he starts to sink. And he cries out, Lord, save me! And Jesus catches Peter and pulls him back up out of the water and back onto the boat. Did you all know that Peter is not his real name? His real name, his actual given name is Simon, son of Jonah. Jesus gives him the name Peter. And that name Peter, it means rock. Can you imagine what a hard time he must have gotten from the rest of the disciples after he stepped out onto the boat and started sinking? Hey, Peter, I guess you really are a rock. You sure sank like one. Or maybe, hey, Peter, instead of rock, maybe Jesus should have named you Anchor. And yet Jesus, the Son of God, he says of Peter, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And what does that tell us about Peter? And perhaps more importantly, what does that tell us about the kind of church that Jesus was trying to build? That its foundation would be a sinking stone. What if Jesus is saying to us that right failure is more important than getting it right all the time? That right failure is more important than getting it right all the time. Think about it. Peter sank, yes. But he had the courage to step out of the boat in the first place into even greater uncertainty. And he sank, it's true. But when he started sinking into the water, his hand reached out in desperation and cried, "Lord, save me." A sinking stone can be the strongest foundation if it leads to us reaching out to take Jesus' hand. I mean, there's real Christian faith happening in that moment. Far more Christian faith than takes place when people are certain that they have all of the answers to life's questions. Anne Lamott, the Christian novelist, writer, she once wrote, "The opposite of faith is not doubt. It's certainty." When we are certain, then we no longer need to have faith. That's why most of the Bible's heroes, they don't even begin to pretend to have everything figured out. Right? Think about the story of Abraham. Abraham is called by God to leave his home in his ripe old age and go and travel to a promised land that he has never actually seen before in his life. And he's told by God that despite his old age, he is going to have all kinds of descendants. And all the while, Abraham keeps questioning and doubting whether or not God's promise is going to be fulfilled, whether or not he's going to have these children he's been promised. But despite his doubts, Abraham goes to the land God calls him to. Moses is called by God to stand before Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world at the time, and demand that Pharaoh let his slaves go. And when God asks Moses to do this, you know what Moses' response is? "God, I have a fear of public speaking. I stutter. You need to send literally anyone else. Anyone else." But that voice of God comes back from the burning bush saying, "Go." So Moses goes. Esther finds herself the queen of a nation that is not her own, married to a man that she is seriously concerned will cut her head off if she doesn't make her husband happy. You think your marriages have difficulties? Still, despite her fear, when Esther realizes that she is the only one who can save her people, she goes and stands before that king and pleads her case. And these are just a few examples. Right? The heroes of the Bible, they were all afraid. They were all facing uncertainty. They didn't know what the outcome would be, and in a lot of their cases, one of the possibilities of outcomes was death. But they had faith in the midst of their uncertainty. They didn't know, but they trusted. They didn't become saints by moving from uncertainty to certainty. They moved from uncertainty to trust in God. Actually, it's usually the ones who are very certain who don't come off so well in the Bible. Right? Think of Job's friends who are just so certain. "Job, you must have done something to deserve all this." Or think about the Pharisees who insisted that they understood the law better than anyone else, even Jesus did. Remember Saul before he became Paul, persecuting the early Christian church because he was just convinced that these people who believed in Jesus, they were all heretics. Right up until Jesus appeared to him on that road to Damascus. See, that's the problem with too much certainty and not enough faith. Once you are convinced that you have God all figured out and that your understanding of faith is totally correct, all it takes is one piece to fall out of place and the whole thing comes crumbling down like a house of cards. God is too big for our tiny human minds to fully understand and grasp. That's why I'd rather be the pastor of a church that is asking the right questions than it is convinced that it has all of the answers. I want us to be a church that is trying new things. And sometimes, yes, that means failing and sinking. So long as we're trying new things, because we're trying to take one step at a time towards Jesus. I know that in those moments that you find yourselves in the wilderness of uncertainty and doubt and confusion, I know that those moments, they just don't feel good. It can be terrifying. But if you think about it, if you really think about it, you see that we human beings, we don't actually want certainty. How boring would life be if I told you right now that I could tell you everything that you would ever do and the outcome of every decision that you would ever make? I mean, that might sound tempting for a moment, but once you think about it, you would see that that would actually take all the joy out of life. When there's no longer surprise, when there's no longer novelty. We don't actually crave certainty, although we think we do. We actually crave well-placed trust. Bungee jumping, it's fun. You just want to make sure that there's a net down there just in case, right? Well-placed trust. That's what Christians have in God. We don't know all of the details of how our lives are going to play out. We cannot anticipate the individual ups and downs that we are going to encounter along life's journey, but we do as Christians know how the story will ultimately end. It will end in the safe and secure embrace of our God. We don't know where the path leads, and that is why we place our trust in the one who can see the entire path from beginning to end. I'd like to share with you all a poem by Rainier Maria Rilke. It's titled The Swan. This laboring of ours, with all that remains undone, as if still bound to it, is like the lumbering gait of the swan. And then our dying, releasing ourselves from the very ground on which we stood, is like the way he hesitantly lowers himself into the water. It gently receives him, and gladly yielding flows back beneath him as wave follows wave, while he, now wholly serene and secure, with regal composure, allows himself to glide. See, we are like Rilke's swan in its awkward waddling across the ground. The swan doesn't cure its awkwardness by beating itself up on the back, by moving faster, or by trying to organize itself better. The swan does it by moving towards the elemental water where he belongs. It is the simple contact with the water that gives the swan grace and presence. As Christians, we come to the water of baptism. And just like the pool at Bethsaida, there's healing to be found in those waters. And just like Rilke's swan, those waters reveal that our true nature is both graceful and grace-filled. But like Peter, stepping into those waters means a loss of control, of certainty. It means letting go. You have to let yourself down into those waters to the ground on which you stand. And that can be hard, especially if you're afraid of drowning. But let go of all the effort. Let yourself go down, however awkwardly, into those waters. There's a legend told by the rabbis who say that when Moses parted the Red Sea, when he stood at the Red Sea with his staff in his hand and he commanded the waters to part, the legend says nothing happened. There was no change. The Red Sea remained just as it had always been and likely always would be until one man decided to go out into the water. As he was wading out into the water came up to his ankles, to his knees, to his waist, to his chest, his neck. And still he kept walking out into deeper and deeper water until it reached his nostrils. And then, only then, Did the waters of the Red Sea part? I do not know what uncertainty occupies your minds and your hearts. I don't know what uncertainty you bring with you to church this morning. I do know this. Just keep moving forward in trust, in faith, one day at a time, one step at a time. And it will all work out in the end. And if it doesn't, then it is not the end. Amen.